One child whispered into the wind that night, but it was the dog who heard her. A blizzard swept down from the hills, burying the plains in a heavy white hush. While the world huddled warm behind bolted doors, a retired ranch dog named Rusty stood alert on the porch of a weathered farmhouse. Ears perked, nose twitching in the storm. Somewhere out there a child was breaking. Somewhere out there, a cry meant for a mother's ears was lost in the snow. No one else caught the words in that whisper. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'll be good." But Rusty did. And what he led his owner, Caleb, to that night would change 3 lives forever. A forgotten girl, a grieving rancher, and a dog who never forgot what loyalty meant, even off the range. This isn't just a rescue story. This is a story about finding home. Before we begin, the wind tore across the plains like a living force. It howled through the cottonwoods and over the snow-dusted roofs of Willow Creek, Wyoming. A town too small for most maps, but stubborn in its quiet rhythm. Streetlights flickered under snow's weight, casting long, wavering shadows over empty roads. Somewhere, a porch light went dark. Somewhere else, a shutter was pulled tight against the storm's rage. Just beyond the town's edge, past the sagebrush, where the glow of lights faded, a lone farmhouse stood at the rim of the open range, its gray clapboard walls and sloped roof half buried in drifts. Caleb Hayes sat on the edge of his bed, the silence around him thick as dust. At 43, he was broad-shouldered, lean, with a frame built for long days herding cattle and worn thin by solitude. His face was sharp, all angles and lines, a square jaw dusted with stubble, a faint scar slicing his left cheek from a barbed wire mishap years ago. The lantern above cast a soft glow, but it couldn't ease the shadows under his eyes or the tight line of his mouth. His right shoulder ached, old injury from a fall off a horse, and the cold made it worse. So did the memories. He'd come to the farmhouse after selling off most of his herd, a break meant to let him reset. 6 weeks, they said. Time to heal, to think. But for men like Caleb, thinking was a heavy load. Silence brought back the creak of a barn door, the weight of loss. Stillness felt like waiting for the next storm to break. He reached down, running a hand through the thick fur of the dog at his feet. Rusty, a retired ranch dog, 10 years old, still sharp as a spur. A border collie mix, his coat was black and tan, ears always alert, even in sleep. His eyes held the steady focus of a herder, calm but haunted. Rusty had worked beside Caleb for years, cutting strays from the herd, dodging hooves, once even staring down a coyote to protect a calf. Now his gait was slower, his hind legs stiff with age, but his instincts were unmatched. Caleb stood, pulling on a heavy flannel over his shirt, then his jacket. Outside, snow fell in thick, slanting sheets. The storm had hit harder than expected, with more forecast through the night. He opened the door to check the fence line, an old habit, and that's when Rusty moved. In a flash, the dog was up. No bark, just a snap to attention, nose to the wind, ears pricked. Then he bolted, straight into the white, vanishing down the porch steps and into the fields beyond. "Rusty!" Caleb called, but the wind ate his voice. Without thinking, he grabbed his boots, yanked on gloves, and plunged after him. Snow stung his face, blinding, pricking his skin, filling his lungs with frost. The flashlight in his hand barely pierced the dark, but he followed Rusty's paw prints, deep and fresh, cutting across the rise and toward the scrubland. 10 minutes in, Caleb was soaked to the knees. The cold bit through his gloves, his shoulder screaming with every step. Still, he pushed on. Rusty never ran without cause. And this time, it wasn't a stray calf or a scent. It was purpose. He found Rusty just past the edge of Tanner's field, where the old playground lay buried in snow. The slide was a hunched shadow, swings frozen stiff. Rusty stood at its base, still, ears flat, nose to the ground. Then Caleb saw her. A small shape, curled tight beneath the slide's plastic curve, half covered in snow, as if the storm meant to erase her. Her face was pale, lips blue, hair matted to her cheek. Her coat was thin, soaked, one glove gone. She wasn't moving. Caleb dropped to his knees. Rusty whined softly and stepped back, sensing the weight of the moment. "Hey kid, can you hear me?" Caleb's voice was rough, nearly lost in the wind. The girl stirred faintly. Her lips moved. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I'll be good." Then she sank back, breath shallow. Caleb didn't hesitate. He scooped her up, her weight barely registering, and wrapped her in his jacket. Her skin was ice, her pulse faint. He looked at Rusty. "Home boy, get the door." Rusty took off, understanding every word. The trek back was a blur. Snow blurring the path, sagebrush looming like ghosts. Caleb's shoulder burned, but he didn't stop. Her breath was all that mattered. She needed warmth. She needed a chance. And Rusty had given her one. At the farmhouse, Rusty was already scratching at the door. Caleb stumbled inside, laid the girl on the couch by the wood stove, and stripped off her wet clothes. He wrapped her in blankets, tucked hot water bottles at her sides, rubbed her hands. Rusty sat close, eyes fixed on her. Minutes passed. Her chest rose, fell steadier now. Caleb sat back, breathing hard. He looked at Rusty, who rested his chin on his paws, ears flicking toward the girl. "You found her," Caleb murmured. "You damn old hero." The storm raged on, wind rattling the windows. But inside, the farmhouse was warm. A girl was safe. A rancher breathed easier. And Rusty, the dog who never forgot his purpose, watched over them both. The fire popped low, casting amber light across the rough-hewn walls. Outside, the storm screamed, but inside, time slowed to a hush. The couch was now a makeshift bed, piled with quilts, a wool blanket, and 2 hot water bottles wrapped in dish towels. Nora hadn't stirred since Caleb laid her down. For the first hour, he barely moved, just watched her small chest rise and fall. Each breath a small victory. Her face was less blue, but still pale, lashes crusted with frost. Her dark hair clung to her forehead, damp from melted snow. Her hands, though warmed, were still cold, but her pulse was steady. Caleb crouched beside her, wiping her forehead with a warm cloth, careful not to wake her. Rusty lay nearby, curled like a guardian, his black and tan coat still, though his eyes never left Nora. He hadn't barked since they returned, just watched, alert, present. Caleb stood, wincing at the ache in his shoulder, an old break from a horse that spooked during a storm. He walked to the kitchen, clicked on the kettle, and leaned against the counter, his mind turning to her. Hannah. His older sister had been all fire and stubbornness before she went quiet. She'd left Willow Creek a decade ago, cut off by their parents after a fight over her choices. Pregnant at 19, she'd been called a disgrace by their father, a stern rancher who valued reputation over family. Hannah left with a duffel bag and a swollen belly. That was the last Caleb saw her in person. They'd written a few times, then nothing. Now here was a girl who looked like Hannah had at that age. Same thin frame, same sharp cheekbones, same wide, quiet eyes. The kettle whistled. Caleb poured water into a mug, dropping in a chamomile tea bag, the only non-coffee thing in the house. As he turned, he noticed a small notebook on the floor by the couch, fallen from Nora's coat. He picked it up and sat across from her. The notebook was worn, water-stained, with Nora's notes scrawled on the cover in uneven letters. Inside were pencil sketches, some rough, some careful. A girl alone at a table, a broken chair beneath her. A woman with angry eyes pointing at a spilled glass. Page after page told a silent, heavy story. Caleb exhaled, slow and weary. He'd seen enough broken homes on the range, enough hands who carried that weight. He set the notebook down and looked at Rusty. The dog's ears flicked, like he sensed something unspoken. "Yeah," Caleb said softly. "She's a storm survivor." Nora stirred hours later. The sky outside was a flat, iron gray, the snow easing. She blinked at the ceiling, then turned and saw Rusty first. He lifted his head, tail thumping once. She stared, unreadable, then looked at Caleb. "You're not a sheriff," she murmured. "No," Caleb said gently. "I'm Caleb. This is Rusty." He found you. She didn't reply, just pulled the blanket tighter. You're safe here, he added. No one's coming. You're not in trouble. Nora sat up slowly, movement stiff. Her hands shook as she reached for her notebook. Caleb handed it to her without a word. She clutched it to her chest. Did you read it? I did, he said. Thought you were dying. Wanted to know who you were. She didn't speak again, but she didn't run either. Later, Caleb brought her warm broth, beef from his freezer, simmered with sage. She sat at the table, Rusty at her feet, eating slowly, like she expected it to vanish. Afterward, she asked, "Can I stay tonight?" "You can stay as long as you need." She looked down. "They might look for me. Do you want them to find you?" She didn't answer. That night, Caleb set up a cot in the spare room, piling it with blankets and a small heater. But at 3 a.m., woken by a half-dream of stampeding hooves, he found Rusty gone from his usual spot. He stepped down the hall. Rusty was sprawled outside Nora's door, head on his paws, tail still, like he'd taken up guard. The next morning, as snow fell like ash, Nora sat by the wood stove, Rusty's head in her lap. She hadn't said much, but her hand rested on his fur, grounding her. The TV stayed off, the only sounds the fire's crackle and the creak of old boards. Caleb sat on the stairs, coffee in hand, thinking of Hannah. By afternoon, a knock came. It was Maggie, the only neighbor for miles. In her mid-50s, Maggie Porter was tall, wiry, with a kind face etched by sun and wind. Her gray-brown hair was tied in a loose bun, her clothes practical, denim and flannel. She'd lived alone since her husband died, and though she wasn't nosy, she noticed everything. Seeing Nora, she raised a brow but didn't pry. "Brought stew," she said, voice low and warm. "Figured the storm hit you hard." Caleb took the pot, thanking her, and stepped outside to talk. She glanced at Nora, then Rusty. "She okay?" "She will be," Caleb said. "She's not mine, but she needs a place for now." Maggie nodded. "Then this is the best place she could have landed." She left without pressing further. Inside, Nora was whispering to Rusty, who wagged his tail once. Caleb felt a flicker of peace, the first in weeks. The storm had passed, but the cold lingered like an uninvited guest, sinking into the earth and bones. Outside, the plains gleamed white, icicles hanging sharp from the eaves. Inside, a quieter storm was stirring. Nora sat at the kitchen table, legs swinging, scribbling in her notebook. The fire's crackle mixed with the scratch of her pencil. Rusty lay beneath, head on one paw, eyes fixed upward, watching. Caleb stood at the counter, pouring coffee, rubbing his neck. Sleep was scarce, questions heavy. He glanced at Nora, then at a photo on the shelf. Hannah, arms around her teenage brother, both grinning in a field long gone. The resemblance wasn't subtle. Same jaw, same gaze that saw too much, said too little. "Nora," he said, voice steady. "Can I ask you something?" She didn't look up, but nodded. "Your mom. What was her name?" Her pencil stopped. Shoulders tensed. "Hannah," she whispered. "Hannah Brooks." Caleb's heart caught. The mug trembled before he set it down. "She was my sister," he said slowly. "I'm Caleb Hayes, your uncle." Nora looked up, eyes steady, no shock, just a nod, like she'd known. "She talked about you," she said, voice thin. "Had a photo of you too. Kept it in her pocket. Said we'd find you when it was safe." Caleb's jaw tightened, hands clenching. He told himself he couldn't have changed Hannah's leaving, that it was her choice. But now, facing her child, those excuses felt empty. "Why didn't she?" he asked, barely audible. "She got sick," Nora said. "Coughed a lot. Then she stopped moving. Then she was gone." Caleb sank into a chair, wood creaking. Rusty shifted, resting his head on Nora's foot. She flinched, then relaxed. "Where were you living then?" he asked. "With Karen and Dale," she said. At their names, Rusty's ears twitched, a low growl rumbling. Caleb caught it. Karen? He repeated. Your stepmother? Nora nodded. She didn't like me. Said I was Hannah's mess. Her voice wavered. Caleb noticed her grip tighten on the pencil. She said I was too quiet, too strange. Ruined things. Told everyone I stole Emma's tablet. Made me clean while they ate her birthday cake. Then said I couldn't sleep inside. Caleb's fingers twitched. He stood, walked to an old desk by the window, untouched for years. Hannah used to sit there, sketching. He rifled through papers, receipts, notes, until he found a sealed envelope with his name in faded ink. Caleb. He sat back, opened it carefully. Hannah's handwriting was unsteady. Caleb, if you're reading this, I couldn't tell you face to face. I never meant for us to break like we did. You were my anchor. I know I let you down. But Nora, she's not a mistake. She's the one thing I got right. If anything happens to me, and this reaches you, don't let her get lost. She deserves more than I gave her. Love, Hannah. Caleb read it twice, then smoothed it on the table. Nora watched silent. That's your mom's handwriting, he said. Nora nodded. I used to trace her letters. She said words carry weight. Caleb looked at Rusty, sitting upright now, ears toward the door. You knew, didn't you? He muttered. Picked her out of that storm like you were hurting her home. Rusty barked once, sharp, then settled. Caleb pulled a photo album from the shelf. Old pictures of Hannah in her denim vest, hands on hips, owning the world. One showed her with a newborn, hospital bracelet loose on her wrist. She never told us, Caleb said softly. Not Mom, not Dad, not me. She just left. They didn't want me, Nora said, not bitter, just fact. That's not true. She tilted her head. Then why did they call me a burden? Caleb had no answer. That night, as Nora slept and Rusty kept watch outside her door, Caleb sat by the fire, holding Hannah's letter and the photo. He stared into the flames, face shadowed. The clock chimed twice. Snow fell softly outside. He looked toward the hall and said quietly, We're not losing her, too. Snow drifted like embers across Willow Creek's plains and rooftops. The farmhouse glowed with life, a warm pulse in a frozen world. Caleb paced by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. Outside, tire tracks cut through the snow to the porch. A county SUV sat idling, steam curling from its hood. Inside, Nora sat on the couch, legs tucked, holding warm milk. Rusty lay beside her, head on her lap, tail thumping occasionally. Two figures had stepped from the SUV 10 minutes earlier. Caleb watched them shuffle papers, exchange quiet words. Now, footsteps crunched up the steps. A knock, firm, official. Caleb opened the door. The first was a woman in her early 40s, in a navy wool coat and slacks. Laura Gaines, a senior social worker from the county office, was tall, with warm brown skin, short braids, and glasses that gave her quiet authority. Her tone was crisp but kind. Mr. Hayes, I'm Laura Gaines. Thank you for calling. Behind her was Officer Tom Brandt, a stocky man with a graying beard and a clipboard. His sheriff's uniform was neat, his eyes weary from too many broken homes. He nodded, unsmiling. Caleb stepped aside. Come in. They entered, brushing snow from their coats. Laura scanned the room. Wood stove, furniture, Nora, Rusty. She paused at the dog but nodded at his calm presence. Nora shrank slightly, but Rusty stayed still, eyes tracking every move. I understand this is Nora Brooks, Laura said, crouching to her level. Is that right, sweetheart? Nora nodded, clutching her notebook. We won't stay long, Laura said. We just need to understand. Caleb handed her a folder, Hannah's letter, Nora's drawings, a photo of Hannah with baby Nora outside a clinic in Casper. Laura skimmed it efficiently. Do you know where her guardians are? Officer Brandt asked. In town, Caleb said. Karen and Dale Warren. Laura stood. We'll need to speak with them. An hour later, the room had shifted. Nora sat in the hall, half hidden, Rusty beside her like a sentinel. Across from Caleb, Karen Warren stood, arms crossed, lips tight with feigned concern. Late 30s, in a cream sweater and sleek coat, her blonde hair in a tight bun, her eyes sharp with practiced resentment. Beside her was Dale, 40s, balding, in a worn jacket, looking like he'd rather be elsewhere. Karen spoke first. "Nora ran away," she said firmly. "This is a misunderstanding. She's troubled, keeps to herself. We've tried counseling, extra care. She just doesn't fit. And now this." Dale nodded, hands in pockets. "She stole from our daughter," Karen added. "A tablet found under her bed. Then she vanished. We were frantic." Rusty growled, low and clear. The room stilled. Karen froze. Laura glanced toward the hall. "Nora, would you like to say anything?" Nora stepped out, kneeling beside Rusty, hand on his neck. "I didn't take it," she said softly. "Emma put it there. Her mom told her to." Karen inhaled to speak, but Laura raised a hand. "Let her finish." Nora's voice shook. "They made me sleep in the shed. I wasn't allowed to eat with them. If I spilled something, I missed meals. I wasn't invited to Ava's party because I wasn't good enough." Laura glanced at Officer Brandt, who scribbled fast. Caleb handed her a letter from Mrs. Ellen Tate, a retired librarian 2 houses from the Warrens. Ellen had called after seeing Nora's face on a flyer. "I saw that girl outside in the cold, no coat, more than once. Offered her tea, and Karen told me to stay out of it. She was scared." Laura folded the letter. "Anything else, Mrs. Warren?" Karen's voice cracked. "We did our best. She's not our daughter. We didn't ask for this burden." Rusty barked once, sharp. Nora flinched, then smiled, like a line had been drawn. Laura sighed, closing her folder. "I'll file for emergency protective custody. Nora will stay with Mr. Hayes pending investigation. We may escalate to family court." Karen's mouth opened, then shut. Dale stared at his boots. No one argued. As they left, Laura knelt by Nora. "Are you okay staying here?" Nora nodded. "Rusty's here." Laura smiled. "That's a good reason." Snow rimmed the courthouse steps like old scars. The sky above Willow Creek was a stubborn gray, holding cold even as the sun tried to break through. Inside the modest courtroom, the radiator hummed, battling drafts. Oak benches, worn smooth, lined the room. The judge's desk slightly askew, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. Caleb sat upright in a pressed flannel shirt, the one he wore for Hannah's funeral. His frame filled the space, jaw shaved, but the shadows in his eyes spoke of sleepless nights. His shoulder ached, an old reminder of a fall. Rusty lay beside him, fur brushed, collar polished, eyes on the door like a herder waiting for strays. Nora sat next to Caleb, legs swinging in a green sweater Maggie had knitted, slightly big, sleeves rolled up. Her hair was braided, her face pale but calm, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. She hadn't spoken much, but when Rusty followed her into court without a leash, she whispered, "He's better than any lawyer." Judge Clara Weston presided. In her late 50s, she had the calm of a woman who'd weathered decades of small-town disputes. Her gray hair was neatly pinned, her eyes sharp but kind. Her voice was steady, never harsh. "Court is in session for the temporary custody of Nora Brooks," she announced. The hearing moved quickly, statements, formalities. Caleb submitted a DNA test from Cheyenne, confirming he was Nora's uncle, plus Hannah's letter, photos, and Ellen Tate's affidavit. Judge Weston reviewed them without expression, noting in her ledger. Then came the hard part. "Mrs. Warren," Judge Weston said, "you claim Nora has behavioral issues and stole from your daughter. Do you stand by this?" Karen, in a tight coat and scarf, leaned forward. "Yes, Your Honor. The tablet was found in her things. She's been difficult, quiet, sneaky." Judge Weston nodded. "Is your daughter Emma here?" "Yes," Karen said, eyes flicking to the door. A bailiff brought Emma in, a small girl with pigtails and a stiff dress, looking nervous. She was 7, her eyes darting between her parents and the judge. "Emma," Judge Weston said gently, Tell me about the tablet. No one will be mad. Emma glanced at her mother, who gave a tight smile. Then she looked at Rusty, then Nora. I lied, she whispered. I put it in Nora's blanket. Mommy told me to. She said Nora was too much trouble. The room froze. Karen gasped silently. Emma, Dale began, but Judge Weston raised a hand. The silence held, broken only by her pen's click. Thank you, Emma. You may go. Karen stood, voice sharp. She's just a child. She's confused. This has been hard on us all. Rusty stood. No bark, just a deliberate step between Nora and Karen. Eyes locked on her. Karen stopped. Judge Weston raised a brow. Not everyone finds her presence threatening. Nora spoke, soft but clear. I don't want toys or cake. I just want to live with Rusty. He doesn't yell. He doesn't lie. He stays. Caleb closed his eyes briefly. Judge Weston exhaled, addressing the room. Given the evidence of neglect, the familial tie, and Emma Warren's testimony, I issue a provisional order placing Nora Brooks in Caleb Hayes' care pending further investigation. Karen looked stunned. Dale stayed still. Judge Weston closed the file. Sometimes the truest witness doesn't need words. The days after unfolded like a thaw, slow, fragile, but real. The farmhouse found a rhythm. Footsteps at dawn, laughter in the kitchen, Rusty's nails clicking on wood. Nora stopped flinching at the kettle's whistle or Caleb's calls. She moved with quiet confidence, her eyes lingering on books, frosted windows, and Rusty. He followed her everywhere, even as his steps slowed. His joints stiff with arthritis Caleb had once blamed on the cold. One morning, Nora paused by the old cottonwood. Snow piled soft around it. She looked at Rusty, who sat with a groan, head on her boot. You always come, she whispered. He thumped his tail once. Inside, Caleb watched from the kitchen, coffee in hand, rubbing his shoulder scar. He'd noticed Rusty's hesitation on steps, the way he waited for help. He hadn't told Nora. She was just starting to smile. He went to the shed, sorting through old tack, boards, and tools. That afternoon he built a ramp, sturdy with grip strips, from the porch to the yard. When Nora and Rusty came in, damp and flushed, it was ready. For Rusty, Caleb said, so he doesn't have to climb. He's not as spry. Nora knelt, hugging Rusty. You're still my best boy. That evening, after chili and cornbread, Nora's new favorite, they sat by the fire. Rusty curled at her feet, nose on the blanket. Caleb held an unread book. Nora traced lines in a poetry collection. Caleb, she asked, what did Hannah like to read? He smiled. Ghost stories. The creepy kind, haunted barns, wind-rattling shutters. She said they made her feel alive. Nora giggled. She didn't get scared? Nope. Loved the thrill. He handed her a worn book from the shelf. She opened it like it was sacred, reading silently, lips moving. Caleb saw peace, not just quiet, but safety. That night, snow fell fine and steady. Caleb peeked into Nora's room. She slept, arm over Rusty, notebook by her side. Rusty looked up, blinked, then closed his eyes. You did good, old man, Caleb whispered. The next morning, Nora drew Rusty and a girl by mountains, titled My First Friend. Caleb poured her juice and sat quietly. Later, Maggie brought muffins, cranberry warm, in a cloth bag. Thought you needed something sweet, she said, brushing off snow. Her gray eyes caught everything. Nora around? In the yard with Rusty. He's slowing down. I know. Tell her gently. Her stitches are still loose. I will. Maggie kissed Nora's forehead, rubbed Rusty's ears. Good dog, she whispered. She's got people now. Snow softened that week, drifting like a sigh. The farmhouse hummed. Nora's morning songs, Rusty's steps, the scent of tea and old leather. While cleaning Hannah's old room, now Nora's, Caleb found a small voice recorder, dusty, from Hannah's days writing for a local paper. He clicked play. Static, then Hannah's voice, worn but warm. I don't know who'll hear this. Maybe no one. Just need to talk to Nora. My Nora. You're asleep beside me. No heat. You kick off your blanket, and I pull it back. You smile in your sleep. I think you'll be okay. Someone will see you for you. Not a burden, just a girl who hums when she draws and shares crumbs with sparrows. I wish I'd brought you back to Wyoming, but they didn't want you. Maybe I was weak, but maybe Caleb will be stronger. If this finds you, Caleb, I'm sorry. Don't let her apologize for existing. Just let her be. Caleb sat, the silence heavy. The ache in his chest broke free. He took the recorder to the living room, where Nora read to Rusty by the fire. I found something of your mom's, he said, kneeling. For us. Nora took it, hands trembling. When Hannah's voice played, she barely breathed. When it ended, she looked at Rusty, then Caleb. She thought I smiled in my sleep, she whispered. She was right. That night, Snow whispered secrets. Caleb drafted a full custody petition. No more waiting. Hannah wanted Nora safe. He'd make it so, not as duty, but as a vow. Early one morning, a thump woke him. Not a bark, a fall. Caleb found Nora kneeling by Rusty in the hall, still in pajamas, arms around him. He was on his side, hind leg twitching faintly. Rusty won't wake up, she whispered. He followed me to the bathroom and fell. Caleb checked his pulse, shallow, labored. Get blankets, he said. Nora dragged two over. They wrapped Rusty, Nora pressing her cheek to his fur, chanting, Don't go, Rusty. Caleb turned up the heat, brought a space heater. Time blurred. Nora never moved, her arm around Rusty's neck. Dawn crept in, pink and gray. Rusty stirred. A paw twitch, a sigh, a tail thump. He's okay, Nora gasped. He's here. Caleb exhaled. Yeah, he is. Nora looked at Rusty. You're not allowed to leave yet. Rusty blinked, groggy. Something passed between them, beyond words, that Caleb could only witness. That afternoon, the vet confirmed cold stress and arthritis caused Rusty's collapse. Nora curled beside him, stroking his ears. He saved me in the snow, she whispered. Now I'll save him. Caleb called Laura. It's time, he said. I want it permanent. She's home. We're home. The courtroom smelled of wax and damp wool. Outside, Willow Creek was white, trees bare, streets hushed. Inside, warmth pulsed. Nora sat by Caleb, legs swinging in Maggie's green sweater, clutching her rabbit. Rusty lay at her feet, slower now, but alert, eyes on the door. Caleb stood in a pressed shirt, jaw clean, eyes shadowed but steady. Judge Ellen Carver presided. Late 60s, gray bun, sharp eyes, and a calm that held the room. Let's begin, she said. Caleb submitted the final papers, custody petition, counselor letters, Maggie's reference, Hannah's recording, and Nora's new birth certificate. Nora Hannah Hayes. Judge Carver read silently, then looked up. Miss Nora, do you understand today? Nora nodded. I think so. Anything to say? She looked at Caleb, then Rusty. I don't want to move again. I'm not trouble. I just needed someone to find me. Rusty did. Then Caleb did. I'm not scared anymore. Judge Carver smiled. The gavel fell. Custody awarded to Caleb Hayes. Nora Hannah Hayes is recognized by Wyoming. Court concluded. Outside, snow fell, not heavy, but joyful. The farmhouse transformed, not in walls, but in spirit. Nora's drawings covered the fridge. Rusty's bed was padded thick, near the stove. Maggie visited often with pies or books, her smile saying, You're not alone. Caleb laughed more, small but real. Then Nora asked, What if we made a place for kids like me, when no one listens? Caleb blinked. Like a home? Where Rusty would go if he were a kid. The idea grew like frost on glass. With Maggie and volunteers, they turned an old barn into a haven. Painted blue, with new windows and bunk beds, they called it Rusty's Refuge. Nora painted above the door. Here, every child is found before it's too late. Locals donated clothes, a teacher tutored, the mayor brought blankets. The farmhouse stayed their home, but the refuge became their purpose. Rusty greeted each child like kin, even as his steps slowed. One spring evening, as snow melted into mud and the plains turned green, Nora sat with Rusty on the porch, in a sundress and jeans, barefoot, growing fast. Rusty lay beside her, fur thin, breaths deep but tired. "You found me first," she said softly. He thumped his tail once. Some beginnings don't need fanfare. Some need a whisper in the snow, and someone who listens. Sometimes God sends no angels with wings, but an old dog with tired paws, a rancher with a scarred heart, and a whisper in the storm. From that, something sacred grows, not in thunder, but in quiet warmth, second chances, and children who sleep without fear. Maybe miracles aren't loud. Maybe they come through fur and frost in love that stays. If the story touched you, share it with someone who believes in quiet miracles. Comment with a dog, a person, or a moment that changed your life. And subscribe for the next story where love rises from brokenness. May you be blessed, protected, and reminded that even in the coldest winter, help comes on 4 paws.